Bruchim Aboy M'Shem Hashem. Shem Egen Shir Torah Mrs. Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir. I'd like to give a big ashikach to the Lowinger family. The sponsoring of tonight's shir, Lili Nishmas, Haisha Mindel, Bas Rab Osher, Aleh Sholem, Regaliot, Zatenish Bosel, Tzura B'Tzara Chaim. I would like to give a ashikach to Moshe Yitzchak and Rivka Padova for the support for tonight's shir, Lili Nishmas, their parents. Have the great tzchus of sponsoring a shir call, Egen Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Tonight was to have with us Rabbi Yisroel Grossberg Shlita Manal B'nai Bina Seminary in Arnava, which is Mamshech Daka of Rabbi Wallerstein Zatzal, and came to speak to us on the Chinuch 2023 Mesorah meets new challenges and what would Rabbi Wallerstein say. I cover the corner by Grossberg for tonight's Rasha.
Shkayach, thank you very much. Shkayach to Egen Shir Torah, to Rabbi Bald. A number of years ago, I had a relative that used to come in from out of town, often during the summer, and they were always complaining about Brooklyn. There's no parking, there's construction. They always ask me, what are you doing living in Brooklyn? One time they came home, all excited. I now understand it. And they were holding the paper of the Egen Shir Torah Shiurim. Now I know why you're living in Brooklyn. You have all these Shiurim during the summer. So thank you to Egen Shir Torah for raising the level and putting Flatbush on the map for all the Torah and all the Shiurim that we have. Tonight's topic is really one of the hardest topics to talk about, one of the hardest topics really for those who are in the parsha of parenting. It's a little scary sometimes to think that your garbage man or your mailman has probably had more training than any parent has had for their job. We don't go to school for parenting. Okay, now the parenting class is much more in. I suppose there are many books that are out, but Lamaisa, considering the fact that it's such an important chelik of what we're doing, and the stakes are so high, we're really, to a certain extent, flying blind. But the truth is, there's a cheshbon to that, because so much of parenting is intuition. And it might sound a little strange for me to say this standing over here, but I have a problem with people that give classes on parenting. Because every single child is different. And it's so important that when you hear anything on parenting, that you understand that these are guidelines, may or may not work with your child, and to have the seichel to understand what to apply, what not to apply. And the truth is, this cheshbon really is the aside, the foundation of Rav Wolbe Zatzal, his famous sefer on parenting, Zriya Ubinyan B'Chinuch, that it takes both. Zriya is planting. Planting is the type of thing where you can put it in the proper sunlight, you can water it, do everything right, and Lamaisa, at the end of the day, it just doesn't work. Binyan, on the other hand, if you're building, you put one brick on top of the other brick, and you know what you're doing, you're going to be able to build. But you need both. Zriya is, we'll call the intuition, and Binyan is the learning and what the things that we come up with, and that we, hopefully, the intellect that we have, and the ability to use our intellect. Part of parenting is exactly that. Making a cheshbon that everything we do is never just random. You can't parent randomly because every decision that we make has very high stakes. If it didn't before, it definitely does now. If anyone is familiar with what's going on in the world, we all know that the stakes are high. Our children have options we wish they never had. Our children have places to go, places to be, and if we're not going to be that welcoming place for them, they have options. And therefore, everything that we do has to be with the cheshbon of chinuch. Everything that we do has to be with the cheshbon of how are we, the decision, where does it fit in with how we're taking care of our children. The truth is, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky in his Sefer Emes Yaakov says that parents really are not machanchim. He says they're mashpiyim. And he explains the difference. A mashpia, so most of the time the usual taich, the usual translation of a mashpia, comes to the word shefa, that kind of we overflow, as opposed to a mechanech who maybe hits the target. As a parent, we're not teaching as much as we're showing. And believe me, our kids are watching us. Rabbi Yaakov says a little differently. He says that really the mashpia comes from the word shipua, that it rolls, that everything we're doing and everything that our kids are watching, it rolls down and hits them. If you don't believe this is true, ask any pre-1A Rebbe. They know more information about your family than you really like them to know. I was once at a dinner where a pre-1A Rebbe was honored. I remember he got up and said, it's really fitting that all the parents are here, because I know you guys really well. I know when you're expecting long before your parents know. I know when you wanted to buy a new car and when your husband didn't think it was a good idea. So I know it all. Kids pick up a lot. And the first time I heard this, I thought it was actually from Rabbi Wallerstein. I thought it was a joke, but I spoke to the Morah. It was a true story of the child who was the Shabbos Tati. And the Morah tells him to sit at the head of the table. I said, okay, you're going to be the Tati. He said, okay, I'm the Tati. He opens his belt, and he sits there and he goes, oh, I'm so tired. Can we eat quick? To him, that's what the Shabbos Tati does. Or the child who will say, where did you learn to daven so beautifully? So I watch my father at home every morning. Kids are watching, and they're picking it up, and it's for that reason that we have to be so careful. And even if it's difficult for us, even if it's something that maybe we're not holding by, but if it's something that we need our children to see, it's something that we have to do. It's not going to work otherwise. I remember as a manal, I got a call from a mother, very upset. She says, I can't believe, what type of yeshiva you're running? My children come home, they don't daven Ma'ariv with a minyan. So I said, well, why doesn't your husband take them? Oh, he doesn't daven Ma'ariv with a minyan either. I said, okay, we're not magicians. Like, what do you want? If they have to see it, granted, if as yeshiva we're going to try, but they're going to see it. And of course, everyone's favorite example, the child who comes home with a letter from the manal, your son was caught lying today, and you give him that whole shmooze, midvar sheker tirchak, titein emes liyakov, you give him the whole shir about emes, chaysom shal kadosh baruch hu, and then when the mashulach comes to the door, you say, tell him I'm not home. I'd like to believe it's a joke. The bottom line is, Rabbi say, a value system is shown, not taught. You can teach it all you want, they're not necessarily going to pick it up. But if it's shown, that's going to be different. I wish I could say that this was me on a regular basis, but one time I came home late and I was already halfway into bed and I remembered I hadn't davened Ma'ariv. And at that time, there wasn't a minyan in Flatbush. I got dressed, I went to Shomer Shabbos in Borough Park, I davened Ma'ariv and I came home. My kids were there when I came home. The night was probably first starting for them then. And when I told them what happened, I didn't even have the cheshbon, but I felt like score. This worked. Better than any lesson I could have taught them about going to Ma'ariv was what they saw happen at that time. And they know I'm not great when I'm tired. So it was that's ultimately what we want to accomplish, what we want to do. Rabbeinu Yonis says in Mishlei, on the Posik, Matzrif L'Kesef, V'kur L'Zov, V'ish L'Fi Mahalaloi, that there are ways to measure silver, there are ways to measure gold. How do you measure a person? Mahalaloi, by the praise. So Pashut Pshat, you would say, that you measure someone by the praise that people give him. You listen to when someone gets up by a yeshiva dinner and what they say about him, that's what you understand, that's what you take from them. But really, Rabbeinu Yonis says no. It's by what you praise. What's important to you. If it's important to you, your kids get that message also. And I saw this idea, I was speaking once to a Rebbe of mine, and he said that sometimes, and it's understandable, you live in a neighborhood where there's so much gashmis and so many other things. Parents have to be careful. If they're constantly talking about the big houses, and they're constantly talking about Yana's car, and so, the message to their children is that this is the goal. You can have two kids, you can have a Ben Torah, someone sitting in Koil, but he comes home and his dagesh is on the chitzonius, his dagesh is on the house, the car, all the other things, and he's talking, wow, this guy made that deal, etc. The message that the child gets is pretty clear. On the other hand, you could have a balabas who works all day, but his child sees that he goes out to learn at night, and he's constantly talking about the rabbonim, how choshev they are, and he's talking about the younger light, how choshev they are. That message also comes home. What we find important is ultimately what our kids will find important. And we have to bear in mind that our children have, thank you very much, lack of a better term, a very refined hypocrisy meter. They can see right away, right through us, when we're doing one of those, do as I say, not as I do. You know, you can't go, but I can. Now, in the real world, I don't have to explain myself to my child. You're right, you really don't. And it's really chutzpah for a child to ask, but at the end of the day, and I'll use this term a lot, do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? If you want to be right, child has no right to question a parent. It's not covered. Parent does. He has a reason. He needs that phone for business. Whatever it might be, and that's right. But it's not necessarily what's going to make you successful with your child. So sometimes you have to ask yourself that question: the difference. Do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? There's another version of that: is do you want to be right or do you want to have shalom bayis? But that's for a different share. That's the famous story of the father who, crying, he brings his daughter to the Rav and says, Rebbe, help me. My daughter wants to marry a guy. Please speak to her, work with her, do something. Rav says, okay, fine. Bring her in. I'm going to speak to her. I'm going to try to take care of the situation. He speaks to her, and after 20 minutes, a half hour, they come out. Didn't get this far with her. Couldn't get anything accomplished with her. I don't understand. The father said, you're the Rav. You must have ways to do it. And the father looked at him and said, I'm sorry. You did this. Every Shabbos you come home and you take apart my drasha. The Rav didn't know this. The Rav said that wrong. The Rav made this mistake. I don't hold the Rav is right about this and all that. Your daughter got the message very clearly that you don't have to listen to this guy. So what do you want from her? She's just following what her parents did. She's following what her father accomplished. It's almost unfair to expect anything different. You can't wake up now and expect that she's going to listen. You were very successful in your chinuch. You got that message across to her like no one else. And that really is the idea. We have to be so careful as parents how we speak. You know, if you ever want to get your kids' attention at the Shabbos table, start discussing something like politics and shul. Mention one name, and all of a sudden it gets quiet, and they're listening to. Everyone wants to hear exactly what happened over here, what happened over there, with this, etc. But we have to be so careful what we say. The kids are listening, and I remember once, there's a whole other idea about how we talk about our kids' rebbeim, but I was once at a house, a child said over there, Dvar Torah. I remember in horror watching the father say, a gematria? That's the best he could come up with, a gematria? I said, I was a bacher at the table. I lost my appetite. I couldn't really tell him what I thought, but how do you say that about your son's Rebbe? Even if you don't like gematrias. Kids pick that up. You can't tell them, again, take everything but that. We really have to be careful how we speak about other people and who we show proper kavod to. There's a term, I'm not fully sure what it means. I have certain possibilities, gvir culture, where certain people are into certain, gvirim and what they'd had and what's the last thing they did, and a picture of them in the yated, whatever. Chas v'shalom, I think it's wonderful, and maybe one day. No, it's probably not going to. But gvir is a wonderful thing. But again, what's important to us? Is it the gvir or the gadol? I once went with a group of. It was a wealthy group. We had gone to Eretz Yisroel to help be mechazik farmers during Shemitah. I'm not sure exactly what I was doing there. Definitely wasn't part of that, the Gvir group. But it was very sad that we came with a Rav, and every time that we went to a Rosh Shiva, the Gaboyim came out and went straight to the Gvir, and passed right by the Rav. Now, you could say it's not their fault. This is the way of the world. It's lies at the end of the day. If they want to live, they need the Gvir. It's true. But that message comes across, and we have to really be careful about that. Early in my career as a mechanech, as a manal, I was a nervous wreck. I was very young, and I just fell into a situation. I happened to be in the right place at the right. I guess we'll call it the right place at the right time. And I was going to interview my first child if they were accepting him into the yeshiva. So I spoke to the Manal was there before. It's very easy if he can read, if he can this, and we have a thing. There's a yeshiva that was a little bit more, we'll call on the modern side. The family must be Shomer Shabbos and Makbid on Kashrus. Sometimes people will apply that. That's a must. They have to be. I said, okay. Had my list. I can do this, no problem. They come in and say, we just want to tell you up front. The mother says, I'm Shomer Shabbos, my husband isn't. I was ready to run for the hills. Come on, this is supposed to be easy. Anyways, Zisa kid, how do you say no? The mother's a Balas Shula, she's really working. The father was a nice guy, he just wasn't holding there yet. So, I asked Shmuel Kamenetsky, and he told me, he said, you can take the kid up until 4th or 5th grade, provided that the father is Shomer Shabbos in front of the child. Provided that he's willing to put on the show. You're telling me he's not anti. He's just not holding there, so if he has to smoke, he can't do it in front of the child. Why 4th or 5th grade? Because after that age, they become smarter. And they may see what's going on, and then they're going to come in and talk about my father who does this, my father does that. He didn't say you couldn't take him longer, but you had to reevaluate in 4th or 5th grade. So we made up, and the father, Taka, really a nice guy, he said, I'm in. I'll do it. I didn't expect him. He went to shul. About a month in, he comes into my office and says, Rabbi, you win. I said, great. Would I win? Always like to win, but what are you talking about? So he said the first Shabbos, I was a little bit of a dafkanik. I said, okay, I'm not giving in, and I was going to go smoke that cigarette. So he asked me, okay, I don't know who's watching this, I have to be careful. You remember when you smoke your first cigarette, how you get like sick and it's nausea, and that's how I felt. I passed out from that cigarette. It didn't make sense. So I took another cigarette, I fell down, I hurt my head against, there was like a metal piece, fine. Second Shabbos, I get in my car, I get into an accident. Third Shabbos, officially I wasn't keeping Shabbos, but I did. And by the fourth Shabbos, I said, if I'm doing it anyways, and I'd like to stay healthy and have my car in one piece, I became a full Shomer Shabbos. And that was how the story went. The godless of the story, though, was right around this time of the year, quite a few years later, I get a call. I remember I was driving up to the mountains, and there's no one on the other end. I hear, like, breathing. I thought it was a prank call, and weird. First time, second time, third time, I wasn't going to pick it up. I said, okay, just in case, maybe it's something. I picked it up, and someone said, I hear again the breathing, someone grabs the phone, says, Rabbi Grossberg, hi, it's Mrs. So-and-so. My husband can't talk. We're here in the airport. We're sending our shimmy to Eretz Yisroel to learn. And we just want to say thank you, because if you wouldn't have taken him in pre-1A, in kindergarten, whatever it was, we would never be in this place now. At this point, he's going to Daf Yomi, he's doing all amazing what he did. To me, though, the godless of the story is that after on, when I spoke to the boy, he never had any idea that his father wasn't a full-fledged Shomer Shabbos from the beginning. That's a father who understands. If you want to get a point across, you got to do it right. And that's why maybe he was zeicha to what he was zeicha to. He gave himself over to it. He didn't want to, but he understood there's no other way that I can have my child be a Shomer Shabbos unless I do that. So how do we do it right? So there's the pasuk we all throw around. It's a linchpin of every class on Chinuch. Chanoich lenar al pi darkoi. Okay, sounds nice. It makes sense. But how many people really know the derech of their kid? I sometimes ask kids, how well do your parents know you? It's scary sometimes. They laugh. I say, not so well. Like the real me, the yeshiva me, this me. Very often, I deal with kids that are struggling. They come to my office, and they're dealing with tremendous pressure because they know that their parents don't know what's really going on with them, and they want their parents to know. They'd feel more comfortable if their parents knew, and this idea of trying to fake is really making it very difficult for them. They hold back. So I'm reading the parents, I tell them, I'd like to introduce you to your son. And he lays it on the line. Very often, parents will tell me, my son does not have a smartphone. Absolutely not. I can be sure, I can promise it. So I'll suggest maybe he takes it out and puts it on the table so that they understand. We have to know our kid. Now, we might not like what we see, but that's not the point. The point isn't for us, the point is for them. And we don't stand a chance unless we really know where they're holding. Your child has to be comfortable with you, because if he's not comfortable with you, he'll be comfortable with someone else. and you don't know who that other person is going to be, you can't choose them. Let it be comfortable with you. Let it be that you're the person they want to go to. I once had a mother come to me at graduation, say, Rabbi Grossberg, I've been wanting to ask you this question for 4 years, and I held back because I was worried what the answer would be, but now at graduation I can ask you. So, why in the world did you not throw my kid out? So I told her the truth. I said, take one look at your kid. Look at what he does for us over here. He does the svarim, he does the fundraising. I want to honor this guy at my dinner in about 10 years from now. If I throw him out, it's not going to work. It's just, many yeshivas have that problem. If only they could, that guy who they threw out is now a huge gvir. How do we honor him and figure out that we didn't mean it, we were joking, whatever. So I said I kept him because I was looking towards the future. But that's really, I saw I have to be honest, I used to give him my svarim shank to redo the svarim, sometimes alphabetical order, sometimes by color, sometimes by whatever. That's what he wasn't holding, not everyone is built to sit in the classroom. And for him, this is what he needed, but he was great at it when it worked. That's why I didn't throw him out. And I knew, and sure enough, he owns a little ambulance company now, 2 ambulance companies. It really works. We have to understand that not every child, Chinuch l'na'ar pidaka, is not just something that sounds nice or an Uncle Moshe song. It's really something that we have to be prepared, both as parents and in the yeshivas, etc., to understand that there are different drachim. It goes so far, the Gemara in Shabbos says that you have a child that shows that they have an atiyah towards dam, if they're born under a certain siman, right? So that would make sound like, okay, forget it, we don't stand a chance. Right? No. Figure out a way, make him a doctor, make him a shaykhit, make him a moil. Figure out a way to take that natiyah towards something which could be used in such a negative way. Something that on the surface, we'd right away think natiyah towards dam would be a horrible thing. Figure out a way for him to use it where he can use it properly. If you have a child who is just more handy and less sitting in front of a sefer, then figure out a way to make that for him. Have him build stenders, have him do things. There's so many other things that we could do, but the first step is know the derech. Chinuch l'na'ar pidaka doesn't stand a chance unless you know your kid's derech. And it's up to us to take the time. And sometimes we have to realize it's not for us to impose our mahalach on our children. Halavai, yes, every parent wants their child to be just like them, assuming they're a good person. So wants their child to be like that. It's understandable, it's normal, it's expected. But if they're not, it doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you failed. It means that you just have to recalibrate and figure out exactly how you want to get things done. So how far do we go then? Okay, so if my kid is really not into learning, so maybe like where does it end? Right? So the truth is, I would say, you have to make, if I can borrow the term from business, a cost-benefit analysis. What are you going to get out of this, and what are you going to lose? Meaning, you want your son right now wearing his hat in the street, right? Like typical flat, okay, whatever. You want your son wearing his hat in the street, and that's what you do, and that's what you expect, and that's what you want, etc. Now, if he's not going to do it, if you make a big deal out of it, what are you going to get? Maybe he will, maybe he won't, but he's definitely not going to be happy. If you're not going to make a big deal out of it, and he's going to think to himself, hey, I know my father really wants it, and it's really nice that he's leaving me alone. I'll cut him some slack. Maybe I'll wear it, maybe I won't wear it, but I'll just remember that my father gave me the space. Sometimes, the famous expression that's so true over here, we win the battle, but we lose the war. So we won the battle. We got it to wear the longer skirt. We got to all these things. And of course, these things we're right. We're 100% right. But it goes back to, do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? I told the mother, she's crying to me that her daughter was wearing clear nail polish. I told her, I said, look, if you're going to make a big deal out of this right now, in a year from now, you'll be crying about hot pink nail polish. A year later, she calls me up, she says, Rabbi Grossberg, you were right. Great, I'm thrilled. I made a big deal out of it, and now she's wearing, there's something to be proud of. You don't always want to be right. So something you have to think. Clear might not be so bad. Again, it's hard to hear for some people to hear this, because what, you're telling me that I need to give it on my shitas? You're telling me that I need to go in a way that, the answer sometimes is yes. Look, you have to ask your Rav, you have to have hadracha. It's not always so simple. We're not talking about big things. Big things, you have red lines that you don't cross. You have certain things that are non-negotiable. But for the things that there is space, and there is maybe, it might be, wearing a hat in the street might be something that you as a parent grew up doing and feel that it's the right thing to do, but your kid's not doing something wrong if he isn't. It's not maybe not exactly your mahalach, but you have to pick your battles. Pick and choose ultimately where we want. We can't make our children into us. So how do we get the kids to listen then? It happens a lot. Parent comes in, I'm easygoing. Maishi, why don't you talk to me? Maishi looks and says, because every time I talk to you, you scream at me. Yeah, that's true. So of course I'm not talking to you. You can't have your kids want to speak if you're going to scream at them every time. We have to be prepared that we might not like everything ultimately that we're going to hear. And like I said, if they're not speaking to you, then they're speaking to someone else. And you can't always control who that person is. Do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? Right is that I tell my son, this is how it's going to be, and he's going to kiss my hand and say, yes, Tati, and go weiter. That's right. You're going to try for that, you're not necessarily going to be successful. Not even sure it's right, but okay. How do we talk to our children? What's the goal when we speak to them? So, I had a mice about a few years ago, about 5-6 years ago. At the time, I guess I felt at the time that I needed a certain kapara or whatever, so I decided I was going to be in charge of putting a Mesifta camp to sleep at night during the summer. Zichah kapara for something. But, and there I was standing, I remember on the hill, making believe that I was in charge, and, they were nice to me, they'd let me believe it, whatever. And I get a phone call. It's one of my students. At that time, I was the principal in BCA, Rabbi Wallerstein's girls' high school for girls that were off. And the girl said, hi, Rabbi, how are you? I said, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I was not surprised, but like, she says, yeah, I was just wondering, do you have access to my report cards? What? Here I am, standing, trying to stop a barbecue, and do I have access to your report? I don't know, you have all sorts of things on your phone, maybe. I said, I ask why you need access to the report cards at this time? She said, well, it's a little embarrassing, but we ran out of money. We're on a trip somewhere, and there's a donut store, kosher donut, one of the chains of kosher, and it says if you have an A on your report card, you get a free donut. We're starving. Is there any way you could get me my report card? So the truth is, she was right. She did have an A, and I got to give them credit for thinking on their feet. Impressive. I don't know what made me do it. It must have been the country air or the barbecues or whatever. Maybe I just needed, they say sometimes we all need a little bit of control when things are out of control. I said, let me speak to the girl working behind the counter, and maybe we can work this out. I said, hi, Rabbi Grossberg. I want you to know, these girls, I can't get you the report card. They're really good kids, and all of them had A's, and they really deserve the donut. And to this day, I can't figure out what possessed me to say it. And I said, and I'm going to tell them that they need to make a blessing on this donut. You're going to answer amen. And she goes, a bracha, Rabbi. I know what a bracha is. I went to Hebrew school. So Cynthia from Hebrew school, somewhere out in wherever it was, Virginia, somewhere, was all excited about answering amen to the brachas that they were going to make. And I stayed on the line. They all made brachas. There were some male voices, some female voices. Okay, they made brachas. Very, very nice. Cute story. To me, that wasn't the story, though. The story was, the next morning I woke up, and there was a text from one of the girls. Rebbe, I said Kriya Shema Lamita for the first time in 3 years last night. What's the problem? I didn't say a word to her about Kriya Shema Lamita. I said, it wasn't a thing. It was just, she felt a little bit better about herself all of a sudden. She knew that she had a Rebbe backing her. She made a bracha. She heard amen. She told me that she was trying to be Makar of Cynthia. I want to say work on yourself first, but okay. She just felt like a different person. She was treated like a different person. She felt like a different person, and she said, Kriya Shema Lamita. This girl is now married, living in Lakewood. I know it sounds like cliche, but her husband's not a Rosh Kollel B'nai Brak, but she's married, living in Lakewood, and Baruch Hashem doing beautifully. Come a long way from Krispy Kreme. Never label your child. I always tell parents, if you know that your kid is struggling with Shabbos, never call them a Machal Shabbos. Never catch them being Machal Shabbos, because now they're in a corner. They are now branded a Machal Shabbos. There's no reason for them to try it. Even if they're going to try keeping Shabbos, they're a Machal Shabbos. You're struggling with Shabbos right now. semantics, but it makes a difference because once you're branded, you're branded. Once that's who you are, that's it. There's a famous mission, Yuma. It says that they read the Seder to the Kohen Gadol, the Seder of the Avodah on Yom Kippur, in case he forgot it or he never learned it. Gemara asks an obvious question. A Kohen Gadol should be someone who forgot. How could it be someone of that stature should be someone who forgot what it is, what the Avodah is all about? Or it talks about Kav Mikdash Rishon, Kav Mikdash Sheni, the difference between the two Batei Mikdash, that the Kohen Gadol in the second Beis HaMikdash was a position that was bought. So you didn't necessarily have the chashivas of being a Kohen Gadol. You didn't necessarily know what it meant to be a Kohen Gadol. You bought it. And they say, who was someone like Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla? Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla had the Kuna Gedolah bought for him. That's why he had it. There's another Gemara, though, that talks about Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla. There's a Ritva, actually, talks about Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla, that he's responsible for keeping Torah going in Klal Yisrael. What did he do? He saw that it wasn't where it used to be before everyone learned by their parents. But he saw that some people whose fathers either were unable to teach their children or there wasn't a father in the picture. Those kids were completely lost. So he instituted the Cheder system. He instituted the idea that you have one Rebbe and other Talmidim, and he said Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla saved Torah for Klal Yisrael through those actions. So 1 second, who is, will the real Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla please stand up? Are you Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla? Were you Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla who was not roy to get the Kuna Gedolah on his own? You had to buy it. Or are you the Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla who was so into learning that you changed around the whole Torah situation, the whole Chinuch system for Klal Yisrael? Who was the real one? So Ritva gives a simple teretz. It's two different people. However, I saw Sfas Emes says that Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla was the same one. And from hearing people call him the Kohen Gadol over and over and over again, he began to look in the mirror and say, I'm talking a Kohen Gadol. I have to live up to being a Kohen Gadol. Over and over and over again. Hearing it, that he's the Kohen Gadol, he grew into being the Kohen Gadol by hearing it. Everyone, why do we call little kids Sadikal? I'm assuming, I'm assuming that it's the same idea. If we say it enough times, they'll believe it. Right? By now, everyone knows Noach was a big tzaddik, right? Okay, but where does this whole concept of talking about tzaddikim and it's called the kids in Eloi? Most of the time we're talking about it. Some kids are, but it's the idea is if we use these terms, they now will grow into it. Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla, by being called Kohen Gadol over and over and over again, he grew into it and he got it. I'll take it a step further. Maybe that's why he was dafka the one to understand the importance of a Rebbe. He saw that if there's no Rebbe there, maybe they could have learned by someone else's father. They could have listened in. But he understood a person can change the life of the student, the Talmud, the child, just by calling them and giving them the cover that they need. That's why dafka was Rabbi Yisroel ben Gamla. He knew more than anybody what we could accomplish by the way that we treat our children. That perception can change a person's life. And that's really how it goes. People rise to the level of expectation, but unfortunately they also sink to the level of expectation. If we show that we've given up, it's a horrible thing for a child to feel that the parent has given up on them. I just saw, there's a book that was put out now about Rabbi Brafman, the Manal from Yeshiva Far Rockaway. And he said there was a case of someone that was a shayla about kicking him out of yeshiva. And at one point, he said, no, we're keeping this boy here. We're going to figure out how to make it work. We're keeping him here. And the Rebbeim were a little upset. They said, well, what made you change your mind? You were ready to kick him out. He said, when I called his parents and said he was being kicked out, they didn't give me an inch of complaint. They said, okay, no problem, send him home. If he doesn't have anyone on his side, we can't hold it against him. If he has parents that can just accept it without sticking up for their child, without coming and trying to make a little bit of a push for their kid, if he doesn't have it, then we need to be here for him, and we have to have the backbone. Every kid needs to feel that they have someone who believes in them. And I'll tell you something, it's interesting. A lot of the girls that are struggling, I know, so they work with special needs kids. And some of them work with animals. They're very into the horses and other things, Wallerstein's ranch. And if you ask them why, what's the draw? I'll tell you straight. Well, I said, you know, I've been working with this horse for a year, and it never once commented on my second piercing. I work with a special needs kid, and he hugs me and thinks I'm the greatest thing on the earth, even though my hair maybe has different streaks of different colors in it. There's no one else that does that. And that's why they're attracted to these kids. These kids get it. These kids, they see nothing. They see goodness. They see just the kids. I'm not saying it's okay to have your hair streaked, to have a second piercing, everything. But at the same time, what's our goal? Is our goal to bring the kid back, or is our goal to make a point? Is our goal to that the child should understand that we love them, or is our goal to say, my way or the highway? Have to look at our goal. Yeah, giving in sometimes might feel difficult and might feel like almost wrong, but we want to be successful ultimately. Meister Rebbe Kaplan, who was a famous Rebbe in Philadelphia, he said that he once had a bacher who was really not masliach b'chlal. And he did have, though, one thing. For those who remember the yeshiva days, there are two people that got it. The top guy in the shir and the guy with the most keys. So this guy, what's even better than the most keys? The key to the soda machine. This guy had the key to the soda machine. Anyway, he's falling asleep in shir. So Reb Mendel told him, go downstairs, open up the soda machine, take two ice cold cans, and hold them against your cheeks, and that'll keep you up in shir. The bacher was like looking around. It's okay, Rebbe said. He went, and he took the two cans, and he sat there in shir with two cans. After shir, Reb Mendel came over to him, he gave him a kiss, he said, you are a Talmud. Most people wouldn't have done this. You are the definition of a Talmud. Your Rebbe tells you to do something that's difficult. Your Rebbe tells you to do something that maybe makes you feel foolish, and you did it, you're a Talmud. Now, you know, I was able to look into the story to make sure it's true because it just sounds too fairy tale-ish, but of course the next day he started steiging and learning and everything, but it's true. It was a game changer for this guy. His Rebbe chose him in front of everyone. You are a Talmud. This bacher, who hadn't had much hatzlacha before, became a Greisa Mutzlach. Why? Because his Rebbe showed him, you are a Talmud. There's so many times and so many opportunities that we have to do that with our children. And you know something? Even if it looks funny, what do I mean by funny? You tell a kid who's struggling with Yiddishkeit and say, wow, I'm so amazed you did this. Now, deep down inside, they know you're really not amazed because you'd like them to do a lot more. But at the end of the day, they still feel good. They still feel good because they know ultimately that you are giving them that push. I heard once from Rabbi Ephraim Waxman that he was by a Shuvu parlor meeting with Rav Pam Zatzal. And they made pictures, they had before and after pictures. So as you can picture, they had, you know, a guy on a surfboard with chains or whatever, and the next picture is him sitting in a besmedrish, steiging away. And someone with an electric guitar, with dreadlocks and whatever, and the next picture, he's, you know, all again, sitting in the besmedrish. So Rav Pam looked at the pictures, and he said, we shouldn't need the second picture. We should be able to look at the first picture and see the second picture within that first picture. It's a tief of art. But as rebbeim, as teachers, as parents, we sometimes need to see beneath the surface. We see our kid is dressing in a way that is so clearly not in line with what we want. Don't look at the exterior. Yes, it's painful for us as parents. It is. I'm not denying that at all. And I'm not saying that it's right. But again, what's the goal? Do we want them to get to where they should be? There's a famous actor in the Yiddish theater, Zero Mastel. He played Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. I don't know if I lost everybody yet, but okay. It's a funny name, Zero. So, Pshat in his name was, he grew up in a frum home. His name was Shleima Mastel. But he was not Matzliach in yeshiva, and everyone told him, Du bist a garnished. And that's where he got it. It's a nickname. That's why he said, if you look at all those things, Zero Mastel. He decided, he said, you're calling me a garnish? I'll show you. I'm the garnish who's now on Broadway or wherever else he is that he's doing. That's every time that he did it. Life, I can't say that that's what made him go off the derech. That's, you know, a lot of things that were going on. Then it was a different time. It was difficult. All the different answers and terutzim. It surely didn't help that everyone called him a garnish. It's so big and so, you know, that if you look, no one should be online, but if you ask your goyish neighbor to Google his name, that's what will come up, that he got that name because everyone thought he was a garnish. Everybody was known as a garnish. It was that well known that it's in his biography. But what ended up happening? This is who he became. What about the concept, spare the rod, spoil the child? Are we going to create a dar of children, if we're talking about all these things about giving in, are we going to create a dar of children who have never got punished? That's a scary thought. To a certain extent, we see that a little bit. So the reality is, it's Rav Wolbe says, how do you teach the rod? Most people said the rod can be a look. The rod can be I'm disappointed in you. Sapasnished. It's not what I expected from you. That's not the type of behavior that I see in you. The rod doesn't have to be a patch. Maybe there is a time for a patch. Maybe there's a time. Speak to your Rav. I'm not going there. I'm being taped. Child service is coming after. But Lamaisa, at the end of the day, it's not all or nothing. It's not either our mahalach and chinuch is given on everything because we're worried our kid might go the other way, or be tough as nails and insist. There's a mahalach. There's a way. And every time, like we said, every situation is different. Every child is different. And if you're honest, I get asked all the time, but won't my other children see that I'm treating this one, that one? Speak to children in different families where the parents really have it right. They can relate. Children, you'd be surprised. Not always. It's not perfect. But they understand why this one is getting more and this one is getting less. And sometimes you have to give certain things to all your kids because you're giving it to one. But if it's done by parents that are honestly fair, and it's done by parents who it's not just random, and they can see, and you can explain it, right? Goes back to the parents shouldn't need to explain themselves to their children. But maybe if you explain to a child, we're doing this for Shlomi because he's struggling. Okay, I can hear that. Oh, I have to explain myself? No, we're doing this for Shlomi because that's what we decided, and you have to accept that. It's not fair. And it's very hard to expect a child, again, we're not talking about an adult, we're talking about a child, to understand and accept that things are different because I said so. There was a time where that worked. Great. Again, halavai. But those days, I believe, are gone. If you feel differently, gewaldig. I'm so happy for you. But generally, the idea of because I said so no longer is just that is not enough. Your children have to know that you love them. Hello, I'm the parents. Of course, I love them, but they have to know it. And you can also have a parent who says "I love you" all day long to their child, and the kid just not feeling it. And you can have a kid, the father doesn't say once "I love you" to the child, and the kid knows it because you made sure that you warmed up my roll for breakfast, and you got the cereal that I like, and you said you'll give me a ride to yeshiva so I don't have to walk. You said all these things. I love you is not just, we have to be really ready to show them. It makes a difference. Because let me tell you something, if a child feels love from the parent, you can get away with a lot. Right? You get upset, I know my parent loves me. And I can be okay with that. And I've seen it time after time after time after time. Where, why is it this parent does it, the kid's freaking out and going crazy, and this parent does it, the kid is not happy, but what's your foundation? And you can't start building a foundation. Let me tell you something. The kids that are off, when all of a sudden parents change and there's love, and the kids laugh at them behind their back. I'm glad they woke up and someone's giving them good advice, but they're a couple of years too late. It can't be that when there's a problem, that's when we take out all of our love and all that. They have to see. I remember I was an 8th grade Rebbe, and I had a friend of mine was in I forgot the name of the program, but learning to become a Rebbe, and he asked if he could sit in and observe my class. I said, fine. Haven't been during that class. There was a kid who was a little tzatskala, he was making doy, whatever. It was 8th grade, and I looked at him, I said, I gotta tell you, I'll take care of you this year, but next year, I don't know who's gonna be there for you. I said, I can just see it now. I'm gonna get a call. I'm going to come with a mop and a bucket. I'll mop you up, and I'll bring you back home in the bucket. So this friend of mine is sitting there like, Rabbi Grossberg just did everything in the books that you're not supposed to do. He embarrassed. He was going crazy. So he comes over to me by recess, controlled a little bit, and said, maybe you could have said it differently. What? I said, I'll tell you what. Go ask him what he thought about it. Maybe give him a little bit of nechama, make him feel a little bit better about it. He goes over to him and says, I know Rabbi Grossberg was very tough on you. He looks and goes, yeah, did you hear it? Wasn't it so cool what he said about the bucket and the thing? So now he's scratching his head. Maybe he heard it different. The answer is, if the Talmidim know that you love them, if the kids know that you love them, the things that you say and things, you're not perfect. We all know kids know we're not perfect. But if they doubt us, that's when they care. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from girls, my parents are much more in love with the length of my skirt than me. Because if I'm wearing a shorter skirt, they don't love me. And if I'm wearing a longer skirt, they do love me. So it's not me, it's the skirt. The kid's not stupid. They pick it up. They have to see that we love them for them. Even if it isn't exactly, they're not exactly who we had in mind. It wasn't the picture that we always wanted. At the end of the day, it's something that they need to feel and they need to see and they need to know. And like Rav Wolbe says, every scream, every berating takes the power of that love and it breaks down that connection. I once heard a parent tell me, he sounded like a little kid in the park. I said, I'm sorry. I said, just like I'll tell you what the mommy tells the kid, who I remember once a kid throws the kid off a swing, and he goes on the swing. His mom looks and goes, Shlomo, what do you do? You see? I said, I'm sorry. I said, that's what you sound like. I'm sorry. That's for children. And even then, it's a shiloh if that works. I saw a Maisa with Rav Shlomo Kalbach, not any of them that you're probably thinking. This goes back in Germany. He was, I guess, a grandfather of the singer. So, but he said, and it's interesting because I heard the first part of the story. I had one feeling, then all of a sudden you hear the second part. The first part was that as a treat, they would get some jelly on their bread. Instead of plain bread, they got jelly on their bread. And when one of the kids would misbehave or something, they didn't get jelly on the bread. Sounds a little sharp, but okay, it was then. Yekas, I guess you have to, expected. What's the second part of the story? That every time that there was one of the kids that didn't have jelly on the bread, he didn't take jelly on his bread. If his child is not having, then I'm not having. I'm not giving in. I'm not giving in. You weren't supposed to get it. But that's how a father shows their love, even in a punishment. That's how a father shows, it's painful for me. And that's not like, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. I don't think that works. But that's a father without saying anything, while punishing, showing the love. And that ultimately is the goal. We have to spend time with our kids. Baruch Hashem, we live at a time where if you really want, it doesn't take much. You get hold of a Torah Times, and you can be at a parlor meeting every night with sushi and carving stations. I wanted to write these things down if I remember. Whatever, everything. Now with singers and cigar rollers and schnapps that's worth more than my car. I mean, it's unbelievable. You can have every night of the week. But Lamaisa, what about your kids? And that's also, though, we live at a time where, regardless whether you're in Kail, not in Kail, we're at a time where basically there's a need for two incomes in a family. So mothers are home less, fathers are home less. So I believe it's a little bit of a cop-out. They came up with the term quality time. I think quality time is a little bit of a cop-out because, so if I do quality time, I don't need to do quantity time. I hear that sometimes we don't have an option, but I think at the same time, we have to also there's quantity also. There's quantity, it's how much time you spend, and yet you come home, you're tired, you're still going to learn with your kid. You come home, and there's a lot going on. You have a chasna, Hashem, we can be busy with simchas every night. The few nights that you don't have the parlor meeting. And sometimes we're going out to mamish mitzvahs. I'm not talking about, people aren't going wasting it. They're going out to mitzvahs, stuckers, and shiurim. I had a father tell me one time, he said, I'm sorry, I can't live with my son, I have my daf yomi shir. It just didn't sit right with me. So he went to Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky. Rav Shmuel wanted to throw him out. He was so upset at the father, which I was pretty much sure he would be, otherwise I wouldn't have taken that chance. So what are you talking about? And I said, no, just learn with your son. Play ball with your son. And then you can go to your daf yomi shir. And this was before it was all online that you could go at any time of the day. Yeah, our learning is important, our mitzvahs are important, but if we're not going to spend time, I saw this in a secular source, but it's so true. Spend time with your kids now, or you'll be spending a lot of time with them later. In the Manal's office, that's not bad compared to some of the other places you might be spending a lot of time with your kid. Spend time with him. And again, it shows. What does your Shabbos table look like? So I have a lot of kids come to me. I hate Shabbos. So why do you hate Shabbos? Describe what Shabbos looks like in your house. So they describe a father who comes home drunk, who's very abusive, and they're just like maids serving. So I said, you don't hate Shabbos. You hate dysfunctional families. I said, don't blame Shabbos. The Rebbeinu Shalom is like an easy target sometimes. Realize what it is. And some of the girls, you send them to another house of Shabbos, and all of a sudden it opens up something they've never seen before. But if we're that family, realize the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming from us, how we run our Shabbos table, how we get excited about mitzvahs. And it's, that it's l'maisa, at the end of the day, that's a little bit under attack. Because I remember the days, maybe it sounds silly now, but I remember the days when we had a contest in my house, rolling wicks, who can roll the skinniest wick. If I'd say to my kids, in such a contest, I don't understand, you go to the store and you buy, I remember we used to have, if there wasn't oil all over the carpet, it wasn't Hanukkah. But now, again, it's all pre-done, pre-this, pre-that. We lost something with that. Our kids lost, again, it's not a bad thing necessarily, but something is definitely lost. They don't have it. The famous Meister with Rav Kreisworth, Zatzal. In the Milchama, he was told, someone had told him that he's not going to make it. And he gave him certain codes to certain bank accounts, Swiss bank accounts, whoever it was. He said, look, I'm definitely not going to see my children. His children at that time were in America. You, maybe. So better you take it, and who knows. Kreisworth searched high and low, he never found them. One day, he's in Manhattan, he's fundraising, and he sees the kid. He's not a kid anymore. He's an adult. He was an accountant, middle-income guy. And he goes over, he's so excited to see him, and he says, do you know that you're a multimillionaire? He says, what? You're a multimillionaire? I have the codes. You're a multimillionaire. Now, that was his Talmidim. So this is the question. Was he a multimillionaire yesterday? He was, really. The money was his. He just didn't know he had it, though. So was he or wasn't he? You really can't say you have it if you don't know about it. If we're not teaching our kids the beauty of Yiddishkeit, the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, unfortunately, we don't hear about it. You have kids, I'm telling you, they can go through 12 years of school, they can do Rashbas and Ritvas and Briskerovs, talk to them about Ribbono Shel Olam, and isn't that for Bali Tshuva? I remember I once gave a share on that, and I heard them whispering, connecting to God, he must be a Bali Tshuva. Where did that come from? But I'm saying, it's so ingrained that we don't talk about the Ribbono Shel Olam. But we should. And it's up to us as parents sometimes that we're the ones who give that over to our kids when we get excited for a mitzvah. That's how we give it over. It was a mitzvah with Rav Wosner in Bnei Brak. Someone came to him, his son was really not well, and he wanted a bracha. He went to Rav Wosner. Rav Wosner told him, check his tefillin. He said, oh, no. I bought the most mahudr, the most expensive tefillin that there are. You don't have to worry about checking the tefillin. It's fine. Goes by another couple of months, the kid is still sick. Rav Wosner says again, checks the tefillin, they're perfect. Okay? Rav Wosner says, I want to meet the Sefer who wrote these tefillin. It's okay. He gets the Sefer. The young guy just starting, but he was mamish, and he said, tell me about your process. Tell me about what makes these so mahudr. So he said, let me tell you what I do. I don't know anyone else that does this, but I go to the mikveh before every Shem Hashem. Before reciting every Shem Hashem, that's how it feels. So Rav Wosner said, isn't that very time-consuming? You're spending more time in the mikveh. So I'll tell you, sometimes it is. So I just leave out the Shem Hashem, and then after I go to the mikveh, I fill in all the ones that I left out. Okay. For those who are unaware, pastel tefillin. Sometimes we have the most mahudr. It looks beautiful on the outside. It is the most mahudr, and really, there's nothing on the inside. I've heard that, I don't remember who the quote is attributed to, but, our grandparents did not have the tefillin that we have. They didn't have the matzahs that we have. All the different things that we have, the big, beautiful silver menorahs, they didn't have anything. But believe me, they had something much more precious that we're just trying to grasp and to get. That connection. An Alta Baba who goes and says a tefillah when they put the cake in the oven. Nowadays, we think they send them to a doctor, a psychologist, when they're talking to God while they put a cake in the oven. But that's how they did. I have to say, most of the time, my grandmother, the tefillahs were not answered. I tell you for the cake. But it was that type of connection. If we can bring that back to our children, it's so much more. There's so much more. So if a kid's not matzliach in yeshivas, he doesn't go running away. He's not going off. I always say, I heard this from one of the kids. He said, Rebbe, it's so funny. They call us off the derech. Could someone please tell me what this derech is? Maybe I'll go back on if I just hear about it. We're not off the derech. We were never on the derech. I don't even know where the derech is. Or one of them calls it, we're beyond the derech, but that's whatever. Do we not? Are we giving them ultimately that derech? Are we showing them what it is? I remember once, it was my first year that I was working at Rabbi Wallerstein's high school, so the girls that were a tough group, to say the least. And no one warned me. So I went in, and I committed suicide by saying, okay, for the next 10 minutes, we're going to daven. Quiet in the room. What'd he just say? Could someone please set him straight? Like, hello, we're off the derech. Did you forget? Like, we don't do that. The girls told me afterwards that they were ready to leave right then. They were not happy about the fact. I remember, I'll never forget this line. One girl said, it's not your fault. Before I came, there was ladies, they felt that the man maybe would be a little bit more yad chazaka there. Said, Rebbe, it's not your fault. I just want to tell you, you're a walking, talking trigger. You stand for everything that turned us off. So good luck with your job. Okay, great. But so anyways, I told them I had to go daven. So the Rebbeinu Shalom put the words in my mouth. I can't take any credit for it. I said, no, I didn't mean literally daven. So for the next 10 minutes, connect with the Rebbeinu Shalom. You want to write a poem, write a poem. You want to write you're angry, right? Anger is also a connection. Ask someone, if you have a coworker you have nothing to do with, do you ever get into a fight with him? No, because you just say, good morning, how are you? You don't have anything to do with him. Your best friend, trust me, my girl, your best friend, you're always fighting with. So if you're angry at the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's a sign that there's a connection. You don't get angry at someone who you're not connected to at all. I said, be angry, write a poem, write a this, write a that, whatever, and that they were able to take, that they were able to go with. I can tell you that by the time the year was over, they were all saying Birchas HaShachar. Sometimes one, all of them. It was unbelievable to see. Birchas HaShachar, some were saying more, some were saying less. These were girls that were ready to leave when I made that announcement. Now, some say, well, but they weren't really davening. You're going to tell me a poem is davening? They were connecting. And without the connection, we don't stand a chance. Without the connection, with that puzzle apparent film that's beautiful on the outside, but sadly missing on the inside. I don't mean to start up with every bacher's parnasa. Is it so bad if we clean our own cars? We'll stand back before we go. It's part of it. It's a rite of passage. It's something we do. Cleaning cars, bedikas chametz. We're not going to talk about hotels, but I'm saying, but all these things that we're losing something within all of this that we're not able to give to our children. You know, you just go through Tisha B'Av, the 9 days. I don't see it so much this year, but every so often you see those ads. Do not suffer these 9 days, thanks to our parva menu. No, you're supposed to suffer these 9 days. And trust me, you go to a parva menu in a fleishka place, you're probably going to suffer anyways. But what do you mean, don't suffer? We're supposed to suffer. I still remember a few years ago, I was in camp, and a kid comes over to me and says, Rebbe, would it be okay if I just take out the back seat of your car, because it's pretty low, and we consider it Tisha B'Av? Because it's going to be very uncomfortable otherwise. I didn't understand. Take out the back. Yeah, I always do that. Someone's car always lets me take out the back seat. It's supposed to hurt. It's supposed to, Again, we can sit and talk about it. It's supposed to be sad. It's supposed to be longing. What exactly does Tisha B'Av mean? But it's definitely not supposed to be something that we just completely do away with. A summer or two ago, I went into one of the rooms where the old good Bachrim was sitting there. I hear they're listening to something. I said, don't worry, Rebbe. It's not music. 3 weeks. Not even a cappella music. Who was it? It was Yankel Miller. Badchin making jokes. Now, Lamaisa, it was not music. They're right. It wasn't even a cappella music. But it just showed a lack of connection. Something's missing that they didn't understand themselves. How that sounded. It's the puzzle, the tefillin that are beautiful on the outside and still missing on the inside. It has to do with our davening. It has to do with our tefillis. I'll end with this. I've been accused by my students that I usually say that 3 times before I actually end, but I think we'll have to end with this. Just to put it all in perspective. We try. Avodah tefillah is huge. There are times where, I think one time, personally, some of the best parenting advice I ever had was that you do what you can, and when you can't, put things, there's 2 different categories. Things you can control and things you can't control. The things you can control. The things that you can control, that's why there's a third shutef. Let the third shutef know, it's time, Rabbi Shalom, that you need to take over and fix this. That's for the third shutef. Understand certain things we can't control. And if we try to control things that we can't control, we usually make them worse. No, we always make them worse if we try to do that. It's all b'yad Hashem. And that's why tefillah is so important. I remember once I was going to speak to a group of mothers of off the derech kids. And one of those mothers had a kid in the school, so I went to her, I said, I'm going to be speaking to your mother tonight. What should I tell her? So the first thing he says, tell her I should be able to do whatever I want. Okay, so, now really, what should I tell her? She goes, and she looked at me very seriously. He says, tell her I love her because she's great. I said, that's so beautiful. And then for a second, I said, one second, it's beautiful, but if you really love her, put some clothes on, go home, take care of the baby, and stop this narishkeit. Like, what do you mean you really love her? Yeah, but she really meant it. And it hit me, I can't apply logic to a totally illogical situation. Yeah, we're looking at this logically. Logically, if you love your mother, you should be There's so many different forces at work over here. We need, as parents, to accept that we're not in control. Not that our kids are in control, but there are forces that are in control, whether it be friends, whether it be lack of self-confidence, whatever it might be. And of course, we can try and we can work and we do that. But realize we can't try to, yes, logically, if we do everything right, everything should be okay. We learn with our kids, we do all these things logically, it should be good. We have to understand sometimes that there are no logic, and when there's no logic, that's when we go to the third shutif, Hakol Bidei Shemayim. Thank you very much.
Shem Egenshir Tyre Moses Boston. I'd like to give a big ashakayah to Rabbi Grossberg for the inspiring drasha. Both sides help sponsor one of the shiurim and help Egenshir Tyre bring these shiurim to the tzibur. Call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com to have this great opportunity. We'd like to give a big ashakayah to the Lowinger family for sponsoring tonight's Sheilu Nishmas Risha Mindel Bas Osher Aleh Sholem. I'd like to give a ashakayah to Moshe Yitzchak and Rivka Padover for the support for tonight's Shir Leilu Nishmas, their parents. Ashakayah to everyone for coming. Ruchadanya ben Akash Shem Arotz HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakes Es Yisrael L'Figure Him L'Torah Mitzvah Shenema L'Noich Chofetz Aman Sidka Yagdul Torah V'Yader.